Hi, this is the business edition of PM Express and my name is Philip Nanfuri. On our plate tonight, we want to examine the labor issues that are arising from the mergers or a merger of two banks in the country. As I'm sure you well know, a number of staff have been asked to go home. A bank has cut its workforce by approximately 11%, according to a story by Bloomberg. And workers, you and I, have been left unemployed again. This is the third time in the space of 2 years where we are seeing layoffs coming as a result of reforms in the banking sector. But of course, in every business environment, where there are mergers, where there are acquisitions, where there are business combinations, there has to be some pruning. The business has to be made efficient to return value to the shareholder. But why, at the end of all this, are you and I, the workers, affected? What can we do about it? What can we learn about it? Are there ways in which this can be done without some mess? And even if it's supposed to be done, how can we mitigate the negative effects? That's our quest on this edition of the business edition of PM Express. But first, we want to put everything into perspective. We have a number of wraps on the First Atlantic Bank, Energy Bank merger issues, a number of stories, just in short form for you to appreciate. And that will set the tone rolling in our conversation. So please, just take a look at this.
Merged entity are expected to go home possibly in the coming weeks. Sources say 75% of the workers are coming from Energy Bank, with the remaining coming from First Atlantic Bank. The two institutions merged recently, with First Atlantic Bank having the controlling stake. This was due to Energy Bank's challenge to meet the new minimum capital requirement of 400 million cedis. Now we're learning that the news was communicated to these affected workers last week. Based on what Joy Business has picked up, the workers are being offered a 1 month salary multiplied by number of years served. However, most of them are raising issues with the package being offered. Sources say the letter to officially communicate the package could be coming soon. But according to persons close to management of the First Atlantic Bank, the action was needed because of what they described as duplication of roles as a result of the merger. They also argue that the decision was guided by a review of job functions carried out by an independent consultant and the recommendations adopted. Management of First Atlantic Bank insists the process was fair and staff of both pre-merged entities are going to be affected. They also maintain that they are still in the negotiation stage and things have not firmed up yet. Some of the affected workers have argued about the approach of management of First Atlantic Bank and the fact that they did not really negotiate with them the package being offered. There are also concerns about whether the planned redundancy is going against some gentleman's agreement reached with the Bank of Ghana after the banks merged.
Right, so this was the first time the development broke, and we heard in there that they were supposed to receive some 1 month salary times the number of years they've worked, and we're also learning that most of the workers are from the target bank. That was mainly the one that was more or less the smaller one amongst them, that's Energy Bank. And after this, we also found that there was a new development. So after this, the workers seemed to reject what was given to them, and we were learning that there was a second offer that was made to the workers. Let's take a look at that. Right, so that was more or less some review terms that was given to the workers after they initially rejected the first offer coming from the bank. But is this enough, and is this subtle practice when it comes to labor matters? I have two astute gentlemen to help us walk through and understand and educate ourselves, so that when you're in the office and something like this happens, you know your position in the law, you know how you are grounded in the law, and what actions you can take. My first guest is John Isiape. He's an advisor on all matters regarding labor. He's an astute and fine gentleman, very friendly, very warm, and he's going to explain to us in detail what exactly our labor laws have to say. My other guest is David Mills. He's the head of HR consultancy at Lene Services. And I'm sure you all know their recruiting firm in Accra here. Another astute one, very well versed in the specificities of the HR world when it comes to business. So we're going to examine both of them, and we're going to see how exactly this affects us. What can we do? How do we understand this? Like, so if a bank merges, obviously they'll have to prune, but when the workers go, what exactly can be done about it, and what's the way we should go? This is the business edition of PM Express, and my name is Philip Namfuri. Stay tuned. Right, thanks for staying with us. Before I get to my first guest to take his comments on the issues, I want to add that as part of the engagements that the workers are having with the bank, we are learning that in addition to what was given them in terms of their financial standing, so they'll give you 1.5 months in salary times the number of years of work, we're also learning that they are going to extend their medical coverage, access to medical health or medical services, and also psychological help. Is that enough to help them through these stormy times? So these two, one on the psychological front, they are going to receive some aid, and two, an extension of their medical services. Is that really enough to assuage the concerns of workers? I'll cut straight to Mr. John Esiape. He's going to give us the bite to understand from the laws regarding labor what exactly the procedure is. John, thank you very much for joining us. So we are here again, third time in 2 years, workers being asked to go home. Even with the, let me go international a bit, with the Deutsche Bank, Commerce Bank merger that was supposed to happen, you see that one of the overriding concerns there was the workers. When the bank becomes too big, obviously we'll have to prune. We are here again with a merger that's helped one bank or two banks to meet their minimum capital requirement. But at the end of it, workers are being asked to go home. When such an event occurs, what is the procedure for doing such?
Thank you very much. And I would want to commence from where you have the intention to lay off.
Okay.
The law says once you contemplate in your boardroom, once you begin thinking about it, and you believe that it could lead to terminations, you notify the chief labor officer 3 months to the time that those changes are supposed to occur.
Okay.
And not only that, if the institution has a union, as you notify the chief labor officer, you notify the union. But you see, if there is no union, the law somewhere about section 65(4) says that you negotiate with the worker.
Okay.
So where there is no union, you are required to also notify the worker 3 months to the time.
Okay.
That within the 3 months, the parties are supposed to negotiate not only the package, but to see whether it is possible to save some of the jobs or reassign, whatever it is, because the intention of the law is to save jobs. So when all that fails and you are unable to find alternative to losing jobs, then you come to the package. Now there's something else.
Okay.
You see, it says when you provide a notice, you must all relevant information must be in the notice, including the reasons for the termination, the number and categories of workers likely to be affected, and the period within which any termination is to be carried out. Now, the chief labor officer also has certain responsibilities, and that is why notifying him or her is crucial.
Okay.
Now, when you notify the chief labor officer, he will write back to you by practice and ask you to go ahead. When you finish, you must revert. Because, you see, when you revert, he must also do some other checks to see if what you have done conforms to the law and other requirements. So even when you have finished negotiating, you go back to the chief labor officer, and the chief labor officer must approve. And that, you see, a lot of the times we neglect other aspects of the labor law. The LI 1833, section 35, talks about such mutual discussions.
Okay.
And the role of the chief labor officer in giving approval. Because he has to check and see that the payments have been done and there are no other grievances. And then the approval can be given. Now, we have a situation where in some institutions, the workers are even terminated. In this particular case, we've watched First Atlantic Bank. The information we have is that they were informed, and in about 2-3 days,
They were let go.
So,
okay, hold on for me. I just want to do a quick recap.
Okay.
So the first thing you do is to inform the chief labor officer.
Yeah.
I believe he will be under the NLC. Is that?
No,
he's
that's
under
the labor department.
That's the labor department.
Yes.
So you inform the chief labor officer of the labor department 3 months ahead of what you want to do.
Exactly.
Then you notify the union.
Yes.
That's if the workers are unionized.
Exactly.
If the workers are not unionized, you have to negotiate directly.
It means that the notice must go to the worker.
Workers. Okay.
You must inform the worker.
Okay. John, hold on for me. I just want to quickly bring David inside here. David, so if you were sitting in an office where your board and management met and then they picked this decision, what will you do from your perspective? Because it seems that the banks neglected this. What would you have done to coordinate this? Does this fall within the HR space, the HR department, to do this coordination, or is a management issue, or is a board issue?
Okay, so I think first and foremost, let me say that redundancies are not a good thing, but they are important. Now, they are not good for the reasons that it certainly affects employees, it affects jobs, it affects livelihoods, etc., etc. However, it is also a strategic intervention by companies to ensure there's efficiency, there's profitability, which is most important if you're running a commercial enterprise. Now, I don't know whether they didn't do that. I can't speak for a fact, but assuming they did not, I'll be surprised, because like my senior colleague read, the law makes it explicit in section 65. If you are pursuing a redundancy, you write to the chief labor officer 3 months ahead of time. You negotiate with the union. If there's no union, you speak to the employees directly or a representative of the employees. Yeah. It's extremely important, and that's because in HR, aside the legalities, there's also a human face. We call it human resource management.
Exactly.
When you're dealing with people, there are too many things involved. You're dealing with emotions, with people's psyches.
True.
This is people's lives. Some of them are the breadwinners of their families. So the process has to be managed with sensitivity, and it's extremely important. So I'll be quite surprised if that was not done. Now, as an HR, if this comes to my attention, and there are case studies. I don't think that this is the first time a company has merged and they've had to let people go. There are numerous case studies to that effect. You can borrow from what other people have done, the success stories. I do know that in the case of when Ghana Telecom transitioned into Vodafone, when there was an acquisition by Vodafone, and I did interview the HR then, who told me that they even made provisions for some people to resign. Initially, so there were conversations, very open-ended conversations with staff, several engagements, several meetings. So the process wasn't rushed. It appears to me that we are here with this case because the process seemed to have been rushed. And that's unfortunate. So conversations were made open. People were given the prerogative or the opportunity to resign. Some did. Those who stayed on and were going to be let go were also taken through a lot of trainings. So they brought in career development experts, psychotherapists, to talk to them about life after redundancy, and even they linked up with recruitment agencies to help them find jobs. So it's a total package. The HR at this point must not just look at the business interest, but also have a focal point on the people and how they will fare
beyond the redundancy.
Post redundancy.
John, you were making the point about the First Atlantic Bank issue and how I'm sure we are all hearing that they were called into, but that's the allegation. They were called into a room and they don't allow their phones and stuff. I mean,
no, but it's a fact. We are friends and yes, on the ground. It's a fact that their appointments have been terminated. You understand? But you see, like we both agreed, the negotiation must be between the employer and the worker. So if you have terminated the appointment of the worker, there is no worker to negotiate with. That's a fact. So, and you know, law fundamentally is procedure. When you get the procedure wrong, everything you have done is null and void. So there are consequences. I don't know who is advising the employer. Perhaps you may have to pass by. Because redundancies in Ghana have gone, yes, a lot of them, there are issues with them. I mean, GCB, Anglo Gold, yeah, all over the place, CBG, that's concerned. So many issues. But such fundamental errors are unpardonable. Again, if we don't address them, they become the norm. If indeed there are workers, managements that are having such challenges, the first point of call is to seek advice. And there is no need to rush. And that's why the law has been couched in this form. That it gives ample time. My brother has said that it's a relationship. Indeed, look, anyone to be declared redundant, it doesn't mean that person is non-performing. It doesn't mean that person has misconducted him or herself. Redundancy means that, look, we are all doing well, but some have to go painfully. Some have to go. And there's a criterion for even selecting those who must go. And it has to be open, transparent, equitable. Normally, we say last in, first out. That's the only basis for selecting. But we know behind the scenes there are some, in fact, if you open it up, those who want to go are those you don't want to go. There are a lot of people. You go to many organizations, there are people who are waiting for redundancy packages and then they will move on.
To leave.
Exactly. So the discussion is intricate. And in any relationship, especially where, you know, we are dealing with human beings, all manner of things can happen. But honestly, I'm a bit disappointed to see negotiations that have not even been concluded being displayed on TV. You understand? The negotiations are going on. Have they finished? I don't think they've completed. Okay? But if we are all following procedure and we build confidence in the procedures that the law has established, I don't think we'll have these challenges. But as it is, for me personally, we must be law-abiding, we must respect the law. And for entities like banks, and you know recently what has happened on issues of ethics and other
corporate
policies.
Everything, true.
For us, for a bank not to be following laid down procedures, the law, I have a problem.
I want you to set this right for me before I go to David. Sometimes I hear this point that when it comes to these layoff issues, particularly in the financial services sector, banks, to be specific, we have to go by what the contract says. So what you want to sign, is that something substantive? Is that really a point to be made? Because some say they are supposed to follow the contract they signed with the institution. So forget what's going on. Follow what is in the contract. If the bank says we'll give you 1 month's pay after you're fired. That's it.
Let's differentiate. In some institutions, I don't know about First Atlantic Bank or Energy Bank, the redundancy package is negotiated and captured in the contract. And when I mean contract, it means the conditions of service. Okay. Where it has not been negotiated, then at the time that you want to engage in redundancy, you must negotiate. But even where you already have it captured, you still have to follow through with this procedure, because there may be other consequential matters to be discussed as part of the redundancy. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
If two banks have merged, definitely have they merged or harmonized their conditions of service? If there is conflict between the conditions of service of the two banks, there must be some harmony. Now, if that was not done before the redundancy, it will factor into the redundancy, because even if you have already agreed, let's assume First Atlantic Bank has already agreed to a package in its conditions of service. Energy Bank may have something else. But you see, when you merge, they can't make your conditions worse.
Yeah.
It can only get better, or you maintain what you came with from your previous bank. So some of these things will have to be carefully discussed and agreed. Again, if there were conditions that you should have been enjoying in your new found bank and you've never enjoyed it, then all of a sudden there's a redundancy, it's a matter that has to be looked at. Okay. And these things are all over the place. When you go to GCB, when you go to CBG and so on, they are there, all the banks, and it takes some time to harmonize. I think Energy and First Atlantic Bank, it was December that they merged also. Somewhere December, okay.
Just prior to the
so just about 6 months. Is that enough time to have done all these things, placements and so on and so forth? If they have not been done, they will be factored into the discussion, because then you are leaving, but there may be some benefits that you have not been given.
David.
Yes.
Okay. David, let me come to you on something. I want you to do something for me on a point John made. The redundancy packages. In a typical signing of a contract, particularly, let's just assume in the financial services space, from where you sit, is it something that should be spelled out clearly that as you sign this contract, in the event of failure of the business or something, this is what you are entitled to? Is this something that is normally spelled out in your contract and when you are being engaged in a company? Is it something that should be spelled out?
I mean, if you're asking should be, I can say yes, but it's often not.
Exactly.
I've seen a lot of contract of employments as a recruitment consultant, and you don't see issues of severance packages stated in the COE. And it is possible that companies don't anticipate that. Now, let me even, before I speak to that issue, let me say that HR plays a pivotal role in mergers and acquisitions. And I think often companies downplay the importance of HR. It rolls back to this understanding that we must realize HR is very strategic. And if you take HR out of that process, you create a problem. Now, when you are doing mergers and acquisitions, like you rightly said, you are bringing two companies together. So two people who are different in identity coming together, there's going to be clashes. Anytime two people don't agree, and mergers don't mean that they agree on a lot of things, especially within the financial space where there are regulatory requirements, you have to meet a certain minimum capital requirement. I think that was really the driving force even behind the merger. So the whole merging process was rushed. You see, other than that, a proper HR would look at, or if you are doing a proper M&A, you have to look at critical issues as leadership. So like you said, again, post-merger, who leads the company? And these things can create problems. If it is not clearly discussed and agreed on, it creates problems. Issues about culture. What was the culture? So Omni Bank and then Sahel Sahara Bank merged. So one bank is an indigenous bank, one bank has an Islamic undertone. Culture issues are important. So this bank is used to this bank is used. When they meet, you see differences. It can create tensions amongst team members. It can affect productivity. You have to look at things like structure, organizational structure. So you were head of strategy and business development here. I was head of, who is now going to be head when we come together?
True.
and if you don't have matured people having a conversation to agree, it creates problem. You must look at procedures like my senior colleague mentioned. So if one company is unionized, another is not, what do you do? So these guys have collective bargaining agreements. It's very clear what their severance packages are. You don't. So what do we do? So and to relate it to this case, assuming, and I'm making a lot of assumptions because I'm not privy to specific issues, and I'm very careful because we're on TV. Okay. I don't want to make authoritative statements when I'm not privy to specifics. That's right. Assuming that one of the merged banks was unionized and the other was not. Now, post-merger, where we are now with this whole termination thing or redundancy thing, like he asked, and there's a critical question to be asked. What do you do? Are you going to go by the company that was unionized, whose collective bargaining agreements is clear, that pay me 3 months salary multiplied by the number of years I've worked and not 1 month? Or you're going to go by the company that's not unionized and so doesn't have a provision for severance but can be negotiated and agreed on. And like again he said, in HR we said that you don't make people worse off. So there's a lot of difficult issues to be dealt with. And these conversations have to be had, agreements have to be made. That's what makes M&As difficult. And it's not a process to be rushed. You also have to look at compensation issues. The salary structures have to be looked at. You have to look at even the identity of the new bank, the merged bank. Because essentially, mergers must create synergistic effect. So we want to be stronger than before. And we have seen mergers that have failed in Ghana. Yeah. And I won't talk about them because of the failure. I've interviewed HRs who worked in these companies, and because EXCO members didn't listen to HR's input into M&As, they failed. So post-merger, you see all these things come up, and it creates a plethora of problems for the companies. So, I mean, to your question, COEs need to be it must spell out the severance packages. If it doesn't, when we get here, we must negotiate. And you see, negotiation, we call it good faith negotiation. Sit down and let's talk, and let's agree on something. Once I don't agree, then I'm forced to, trigger the legal process. So if people have gone to Labour Commission to make a case because they are not satisfied with the agreements that are going on, the negotiations that are going on. And I do hear things about the culture again at the bank. Culture is sensitive. People perform relative to the culture or the environment that they work in. They find themselves. So it's like a fish. When you take a fish out of water, it dies. So, and we're in an era where there are a lot of millennials in organizations. These breed are very rare. If you don't create an enabling culture that makes them thrive, it's problematic. I have interviewed a senior executive of First Atlantic Bank, and the kind of information I deduced from the conversation I had with him tells me that there's a cultural problem there. And sometimes even the HR cannot do anything about it. Because you see, don't forget that culture starts with the CEO. Okay. The CEO's personality defines the culture of the company. And it runs through to the bottom. It runs through. So if there's a problem with how the CEO thinks and how he approaches things and deals with people, it doesn't matter who the HR is. Because I know CEOs who literally get HR to do what they want them to do. But
you see, just to interrupt you, I think this is the problem in our country. We see HR as, forgive me, as HR. HR is where you go to, for lack of a better word, pick paracetamol, pick something. I don't think the Ghanaian environment has come to understand fully the pivotal function that HR plays. Because you see in other jurisdictions, the role HR plays. I'm not even sure the CEO of a company can get parking tickets to his own parking lots without the permission of HR. Exactly. But within our space, it's the other way around. And it gets very, very disturbing and bothering. One thing that I want to pick on and give to John to answer for me, the issue of unions. We always hear that the banks, we don't like unions, or we're not unionized. Why is that the situation? Because I don't know if it's fact or it's just rumor, but most of the financial institutions, majority of them, let me say some to be specific, they don't have unions. Why isn't that key?
Well, whether you join a union or not is a fundamental right.
So it doesn't really matter
no,
if
it
you're a
doesn't.
union or not.
No, it doesn't.
You can still demand what is due you.
The only thing is that, you see, I'm not a banker. So if there's any issue about banking, I'll go and consult a banker. If I need to understand something about HR, I'll go to my brother. But if it has to do with labor matters, what makes you think that you can sit in your corner without consulting the experts? If you are sick, you go to the doctor. You need legal aid, you go to the lawyer. But a lot of people believe that because they sat with their HR or employer and they looked through their employment letter and they were able to sign that, yes, I've gotten a job. When it's time for these things, they can easily sit and have a discussion.
Yeah.
And so, yes, forget about the experts. It doesn't work that way. So, if indeed you are working in an organization, a bank, and you think that you can manage your own affairs, you don't have to join a union or form even an association and even get a consultant to be handling your HR or employment relations matters, it's up to you. Nobody can compel you to join or form such associations. But at the same time, no employer must dissuade any employee from joining a union or forming one
Okay.
or an association or seeking experts' advice to handle their HR matters. In this particular case, I understand the workers are getting an expert or a consultant to negotiate for them. It's their right. The law even says so. Okay, so whoever wants to join a union, is up to them. We know that some banks and some other institutions prevent their members or their employees from joining unions or forming one. Currently, I know an organization that is doing some research, and I'm hoping that they'll come out with the names or with those institutions that are engaged in this matter. I know one of the banks that has recently, whose license has recently been withdrawn.
Yeah.
I spoke to some of the workers, and they told me in confidence that yes, they have even signed an agreement that they won't join a union or form one. I said, give me a copy. And you know, in this country, they chicken out.
Yes, chicken out. But does the law allow such institutions to be dealt with, met out some punitive measures to them? So if it's found out that you have prevented people from forming unions, can such an institution be punished? Does the law allow for such?
Oh yes, the law is clear. I think it's under unfair labor practice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You see, and even there's a portion of the law which says that you can't even terminate a worker just because he's trying to form a union.
Section 63.
Yes, 63 is there.
Okay.
Subsection 2.
Yes, but from 130 or 129 to 133, it's clear. Unfair labor practice is prohibited. You understand?
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, my brother, the reality is that in the institutions, they dangle things around, and the workers is a bait. So the workers themselves become agents for the employer in nipping such unions in the bud.
Okay.
And you're able to do it, they give you a raise or they give you a promotion. And so, and people have risen through the ranks
Based
just
on such things.
for doing such dirty work that has denied people their fundamental human rights. And it's not unacceptable. Again, also, companies, especially foreign companies, or generally companies that are establishing, should be schooled on some of these practices. The labor law, you see, if we are not, again, allowing HR practitioners, and HR practice is a highly professional technical area.
Very, extremely.
Some of those little things that you may gloss over, the HR person will tell you, hey, don't take this for granted. You joke with that advice, your organization will just go deep down. Because the environment, the culture, and everything will have to be managed. If you don't manage it, you're in trouble.
Okay. David, Let me pick your brain on this. Prior to all this bank mergers and acquisitions we saw, in the race to meet the minimum capital requirements, one drum that was beaten throughout was merge or step down. Do you think, in your own personal opinion, do you think we didn't take full cognizance of the effects? Like you said, picking on your M&A failing to achieve synergy. Because I remember I was in a class of people where we were discussing M&As, and I think the figure was about 50% plus of M&As globally have failed to achieve synergy because of some of the post-merger integration issues, culture, like you mentioned. Do you think, as a country, in reforming this banking sector, we failed to take full cognizance of the HR part of it?
We probably didn't. I think that what the central bank did was what it had to do. So it had to make sure we had a financially stable and healthy framework that makes sure that depositors' funds are protected, and we don't run into a situation where tomorrow we are told that this bank has collapsed because they are no longer liquid. So I think that from the perspective of the central bank, they did what they had to do. It was up to the banks that wanted to merge, that knew ahead of time that they couldn't meet the capital requirements and hence had to merge, to do what they had to do where HR is concerned. So I won't lay the responsibility at the doorstep of the regulator. The banks that had intentions of going into mergers had to pay specific attention to the HR matters involved in the M&A. And like I said before, I think we take the pre. You see, mergers and undergoes three processes. So there's a pre, there's a merger itself, and then there's a post. And at every stage, it's important that certain things are done. You must do extensive due diligence at the pre-merger stage to be sure that even this company we are merging with it will yield the desired result. You know, and often we overlook those things. I think that, and as my personal opinion, I think that some of the banks rushed. Because look at the time some of them even merged. It was very close to the deadline. So it just tells you that the merger was to achieve a certain objective, to make sure that they met the minimum capital requirement. So if it really was about restructuring, coming together to synergize forces to have a more competent and profitable bank, they would have thought about it a little bit earlier, started the process earlier than they did. That way they would have been able to look critically at the HR issues and the people issues that matter. We need to also recognize the fact that, and I think that the affected employees have done what is right. I mean, redundancy is a termination process, and the labor law is explicit in section 64. If it says, and permit me to read,
please.
Somebody says that even lawyers don't have the law in their head; they keep it in their pocket. So let me read specifically section
64 you were mentioning, or
63 4
63
63 section 63 subsection 4 A and B. It says that a termination may be unfair if the employer fails to prove that the reason for the termination is fair. The reason for the termination is fair. Now here the reason could be fair. It's redundancy. This is an organizational restructuring effort to make it leaner, efficient, and profitable. It's fine. But the B says that the termination was made in accordance with a fair procedure or this act. So the termination must be made in accordance with a fair procedure.
Okay.
And there's a ruling on a case, Kobe and 24 others also, against Ghana Manganese Company, where the judge said that companies cannot terminate at the whims and caprices of the employer. And that if a termination cannot be proven to be fair, then it is unfair. Now, the question I'm asking is whether this procedure was subjected to fairness. You see? True. Because now we are getting aftermaths of, if you like, they are rethinking the decision. So we are going to do this. We increase it from 1 to 1.5. True. And then we'll add health.
It becomes like some reactionary.
So it's a bit reactionary. I think that it should have been thought through well. It should have planned it ahead of time. And I'm saying I do know the HR at First Atlantic Bank. Actually, he's been calling me whilst I'm sitting here. He's a friend. And so I don't know the intricacy of the story. He might have an opinion, but the point is that sometimes, and I won't blame HR entirely, because I do know the difficulties HR have with even getting the attention of CEOs to ratify decisions and to listen to them. We all need to understand that HR is critical, is pivotal to business growth.
Yeah.
And if we have given a seat to HR at the table, we must listen to their voice, because whatever they say shapes strategy and shapes decisions. If probably they had listened, and I do know that sometimes HR make very useful input, they just don't listen.
Yeah.
In the case of one of the telcos, the HR did make very important, useful contributions. The MD then didn't listen. It turned out that the post-merger was terrible, because all the suggestions the guy gave wasn't adhered to. So CEOs must listen to the HR voice and look at things from a very holistic perspective. You are dealing with people, and people I mean, for lack of a better, people are not machines.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful how you manage relationships,
okay,
etc., with them.
John.
Yes, ma'am.
We will be heading into another reform, if I can put it so, in the financial sector. The savings and loans, microfinance, etc. It's too early to say that we would suspect that jobs will be lost, but I think it's safe to say that some amount of jobs may be lost if the reform will take the same shape as it did in the banking sector. From where you sit, and like I was saying to myself, I think you have drunk the whole Labour Act, and I'm sure if I called you in the night tomorrow morning, you can give me everything on point. What should be done? This is the biggest platform in media. Tell us what should be done so that upcoming restructurings, people follow, and then it doesn't become a recycled news item. People lost their jobs, people are complaining. Lost their jobs, people are complaining. What should we do?
Okay, I think I've at the initial stage spelled out the procedure. But
Yes,
I think David has added to it that the workplace is a relationship. If you don't relate well, the work will not go on. We are talking about the savings and loan microfinance sector, which may be the next move. But let me hasten to add that what has happened in the banking sector, especially with the labor issues, is nothing to write home about. Look, there is no way you can merge banks or take over and put employees on probation. There are legal pronouncements on this. Even the labor law section 21 is clear. You see, let me just go there. 21 is saying that, look, continuity of service shall not be regarded as interrupted by mere change of ownership or management of the undertaking.
That's clear.
And yeah, very clear.
And no, there are legal pronouncements on it. But we have seen, you know what happened in CBG, GCB. How come we are putting people on probation? And then we end up giving them appointment letters. Workers who have been working and you've taken them over or merged, they are continuing. If you want to get them off,
follow the procedure.
You know what is happening now? Termination at will. That's a new monster. And undertakings believe that termination at will means you wake up and then give notice and you terminate. Yes, that's the old order. In relationships, you don't do that. If you don't want to go by misconduct, you don't want to go by performance, you don't want to go by redundancy. So they are fair terminations. But you just wake up and give somebody notice and you say go home. Well,
what's wrong?
No. I mean, you would have complied with the notice clause.
Yeah.
But there are consequential matters. If you want to terminate, like you rightly said, fair procedure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's spelled out. If you are giving the person notice, you satisfy the notice clause. What else? It's a mutual thing. Yes, I can't work with you again. In a relationship, I must also tell you, oh, okay, yeah, I understand that you can't work with me. See me off. But today, they say, look, I'm terminating you at will, even though their conditions don't permit.
Yeah, but you see, before you terminate, we must be a contract determinable at will.
Exactly.
So if the contract of employment doesn't spell out that it's a contract terminable at will, you can't terminate at will.
Okay.
But you see, these days there's also a ruling, a court ruling, where the judge seemed to support the idea that a company also has the prerogative to terminate.
Oh yes.
But just like you can also get up one day and say, I have resigned.
Yes. No. You see?
And, you see, and I actually had a very lengthy argument with an HR friend over this, that I disagree to an extent. He said that there's a ruling. I think the tragedy is that once it becomes a court ruling, it becomes a case study
where you have
other judges can actually pick on
where you have conditions of service.
That shouldn't fly in the face of the conditions of service.
That should be fine. See, where you have conditions of service, then what the nature of the termination is what pertains in the conditions of service or your HR manual. That has been determined by the Supreme Court. Okay, so there's no doubt about that. It is something that is coming, and we need to find time and come back here to deal with that matter.
We will.
We need to deal with it. Then on this other dimension, the Bank of Ghana must sit and look at the mistakes that were done with the banks. So they don't repeat them. Because over there is a very murky situation. It's so fluid. Yeah. The nature of the employment and all the other things that go with it, we need to be careful. And there is knowledge available. The Bank of Ghana and other stakeholders must tap into that knowledge and make sure that we do this so we don't tarnish our image as a country. But what happened in the banks, look, we have friends, some outside the country, and they say, look, we don't do that. We don't. But it's been done.
Okay. And
there is a lot of work that has to be even tidied in what has been done already in CBG, in GCB, in First Atlantic, and Omni, all of them. There are lingering issues. They have not been settled yet. But I think that as we move into the other sector that you've just talked about, which is microfinance and savings and loan, these should guide us. And perhaps how we do it better there could have some
positive effects.
Yes, effect on the banks.
Okay. David, your final comments as we draw down on our conversation. From the HR perspective, I'm sure people are watching and listening to us. Some may be First Atlantic workers. I know a friend of mine called me this week. She fortunately was safe, but it's hit her. She's unhappy. Looking at her colleagues she's worked with.
Yeah. Go home.
What can we tell them?
Listen, it's, like I said earlier, it's not a pleasant thing at all. It's a necessary evil, and that's why it has to be managed tactfully. I moderated a conversation somewhere last year, and one of the panelists had led a major redundancy program in one of the telecommunications firms, and I asked her, what did she do to ensure people didn't go home and go and drink poison and die or commit suicide? And it was interesting the answer she gave. She said that they were very particular about that. And that's why I earlier on mentioned that we have to be sensitive to the psycho-emotional needs of people when we are embarking on such massive programs. Redundancy is not the usual way to terminate. It is necessary, but it comes with implications and has to be managed and well thought through. So my word is this. I think that HR has come of age, but we have to do more. More in the sense that HR professionals themselves must build capacity, demonstrate competence at the highest level, show that they are business savvy, so that CEOs can respect them and trust their advice. Because whether we like it or not, these things come back to hit the chest of the HR. So it could be the CEO behind the scenes, engineering all these things. But if people are called, they call the HR. That what did you do about it? So we need to step up our game where our competence, our advocacy and our understanding of business, and also pushing for results is concerned. But I think that companies should respect HR and not just pay lip service to the fact that HR is strategic and we have a seat at the table. Let's respect what HR people do, not interfere with their work more importantly. The interference is probably one of the biggest upsets in HR management. CEOs give instructions, fire this person. And I hear it countless times. You send somebody, you recruit somebody for a company, 3 months he's sacked, or 6 months he's sacked, 9 months he's sacked. And when you have a conversation with the HR, the MD said we should fire him. And in as much as the HR gives a professional advice that, Chief, this termination is unfair. If this guy goes to Labour Commission, we've lost. He insists that you fire him. And before you know, he brings his family member to replace him 3 months after. So that's the problem. We need to respect HR.
I want to say thank you very much for your time. This has been the business edition of PM Express. My name is Philip Nanfuri, and my guest, Johnny Siape. He's an advisor on all labor matters, and David Mills. He's the head of HR consultancy at Lene Services. It's been a very interesting discussion. I hope you have been well educated and well informed. Thank you, and have a good night.